Hey everyone, Sam here at Model Chili Scale Models, and here is the Battlestar Galactica from Moebius Models, the original Battlestar Galactica, at 1:4105 scale. So this thing is huge, and as you can see the box itself is pretty substantial. Really nice artwork on the front there, and some nice detailed shots on the back. I'm hoping this will be a relatively simple paint job, and a lot of these really nicely moulded details will help to scale the kit. But let's start by having a look inside of the box. So we've got a decal sheet, instruction book, and a lot of bag of sprues. Bag 1, metal stand. Looks like part of the back, the pylons connecting to the fighter bays. Some more hull detail. Here. Stand. And the flight pods. A huge alligator-like head. The back of the engine compartment. And a clear part for the engines, and that's it. Also, they've included some really nice little matte painting pictures to put inside each of the landing bays, which is a pretty cool touch. I think this goes in the back of the landing bay. So just before I get started, I thought I would take a closer look at some of the bits out of the bag. So you got the engine section at the back. This is actually my first Moebius Models kit that I've built, so quite looking forward to seeing how this turns out. But first impressions, the moulds are really clean and sharp. It was almost approaching Bandai level of quality. But I will be gluing this together, so it's not a snap together kit. And my plan is to build everything up and then paint it all as one piece. And so here's the head. Front section. It's a really distinctive shape. Quite flat and broad. Quite a bit flatter than the reimagined Galactica. But again, there's some really nice detail there. Alright, so let's get building. And to fill in the gaps, I'm just using Vallejo plastic putty, which has got a nice fine tip at the end to really get into some of those difficult places. And here's the tip of the bow. That's a really nice piece. Okay, so that's the bow piece completed. Everything attached there. There's still a few minor gaps that I need to fill in under here and around the side here, but I'll do that towards the end of the build before I put on the base coat. But so far so good. So now I need to move on to the major interconnecting piece between the head and the engine and the pylons to the fighter bays. Okay, so one thing I've noticed about this model is that the instructions clearly tell you to put this piece in after putting the sidewall in, but it doesn't just slide in. You really have to kind of push and shove parts out of the way. So I need to get that peg into that hole, but it won't fit, so I just need to jam it in and just actually bend the plastic so it gets in there. And I've had to do that a few times. So it's I'm not fearing that the part's going to break. The pieces have quite a bit of give to them, but you do have to do quite a bit of shoving and bending and twisting on this kit, which is slightly unusual, but it seems to work out. And yes, I do have 2 different glues going here. In case you're wondering why I'm using 2 different glues, is Tamiya's cement, the normal stuff, that's like the really thick gloopy stuff. I use this mainly for main structural pieces, like gluing in these bits here and large pieces together. And then the Tamiya extra thin is just to minimise the mess and the amount of glue that I need. So I usually use this if there's a small part or there's a part that I can fit first and then glue later. So for that part there, I put it on first. And then this, once you touch the brush to the part, the glue is so thin that the capillary action sucks the glue into all of the joins because it's so thin. That's how it works, basically. And because it's so thin, it evaporates really quickly, so this sort of glue is not very good for gluing 2 large pieces. Like if I was to put a glob of glue down here and then get another piece and attach it, chances are this glue is already evaporated by the time I'm ready to put the other piece on. As you can see, it's already half evaporated. But if I want the glue to stick around a little bit longer, then I use just the normal cement. So basically this is for pre-gluing before attaching pieces, and this is for post-gluing after attaching pieces. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense. Alright, so before I glue the engine part onto the back, I'll need to paint and insert the clear part to the back there, so I'll do that later on once I've finished painting it, so I can just slot this in here without gluing it, paint it all up, and then pull it out later on. Alright, so I've cut out the little cardboard inserts for the landing bay at the back of the flight pods there. So what I'm going to need to do before I stick on the top half is to paint inside here. I'll just match the colour of the graphic, just a dark grey inside here, inside there, and maybe just spray a little bit of red along the side here to match the lighting of all the Vipers parked up. You probably won't even see much once this is all closed up because there's no lighting or anything, so it's just going to be a little bit of extra detail to just add for the sake of it, really. Alright, so I've let these set from the white glue, and I've just given them a quick blast of Tamiya Flat Clear from a spray can, just to get rid of the shininess of the card and the glue. And so those are looking pretty set. So now I can attach the top. Alright, so there it is all put together, and yep, it's a big one. Struggling to get it all in the camera. It's very long, very flat, quite wide, and yeah, there's quite a few gaps I need to fill in before moving on to painting, but overall I'm pretty happy with how it went together. As I said before, there's quite a few parts that you need to really sort of force into position, but everything went together without snapping or breaking. Overall, I think it's gone together really well, and really happy with how it's come out so far. As I suspected, you can't really see inside the flight pod, so that was mostly a waste of time, but yeah, at least we know it's in there. So yeah, so I'll fill up some of these gaps and then get on to painting. Right, so on to painting. Now, if you've watched the original Battlestar Galactica, or seen reference screenshots of it, then it is a very kind of really whitish, light grey spaceship. And the instructions actually say that the original Battlestar Galactica, was painted off-white and was not weathered, emphasis, bold and capitals. So yeah, unlike the sort of reimagined Galactica or a lot of Star Wars ships, there's going to be no panel washing, no weathering, no chipping, even a dark undercoat, which I usually do on ships' details as this. So I don't really have many options. What the instructions do suggest is priming in light grey and then dusting on an off-white coat. So I think I'm going to try that out first. So I'll prime it in light grey and then go over with the airbrush some white grey or off-white and see how it looks. Although it says neutral off-white, the only off-white I've got does actually have kind of a, where is it, ivory cream tint to it, which it says, it mentions twice. Light neutral grey with no cream or ivory tones, and it says it again down here. So yeah, clearly stressing that it wasn't a creamish white, it was a strictly neutral whitish grey. So I think I've got some paints for that, but first I'll get it all coated in light grey primer. And so it's had a coat of grey primer, and now I'm going to do a base coat of Vallejo Model Air White Grey. And so here's how it's looking after a coat of the white grey, and I'm pretty happy with how that's gone down. It's a mostly even coat, top and bottom. But yeah, it is a shame that I really can't go to town with the weathering and painting different coloured panels and panel shading and applying a pin wash. You could certainly have a lot of fun weathering this up, but even so, I still think it looks pretty impressive how it is, especially once the light casts shadow across all of that detail. It really looks like a gigantic capital ship, just with its single colour. It kind of looks really bulky and it has a nice weight to it. And I want to keep it relatively faithful to the TV show, so I'm pretty much going to leave it like this. But what I'm going to do now is just apply a very thin colour of pale blue grey, just in certain patches, like on some of these domes and patches around the ship, just to indicate just a tiny little bit of weathering. I don't want it to look completely flat. So I'll spray a bit of that on and see how it looks there. Alright, so there's how the grey patches turned out. And yeah, I actually really like that. It gives the eye something a bit extra to look at, and it's not too distracting from the overall paintwork. Just gives it a bit of history and a bit of use, a bit of wear and tear that's not too over the top. So now the next step is to give this a coat of Tamiya Gloss Clear from a spray can. Alright, so now it's time for some decals. And as you can see, there's just lots of red striping, and then just the ship name. And yeah, I'm going to go with Galactica. It's got a nice list there of different options. Okay, so that's the decals done. And I have to say, they are some of the worst decals I've had to deal with in a long time. You'd think that just a bunch of straight, square decals that went on relatively even surfaces would go on quite simply, but not really. They were just so brittle. They cracked, they fell apart. Just pulling them, even just moving them with the tweezers, they started to crumble up. I wish I had recorded it, but I was just doing it with my camera away. But yeah, it wasn't very fun. This one just completely broke up. And I salvaged as much as I could. And I'm just going to fill in the rest with some red paint. And the ones around here on these raised ribs, they are cracked and broke up a lot because they needed quite a lot of setting solution. And for that I'm just using some microsol to help them sink into all of the raised edges. But doing that, it kind of shrinks the decal, and because you need so much of it on these particular decals, it started to shrink away, especially around all the cracked areas. So as you can see on the front of the flight pod there, it started to pull away as it shrunk. So again, I'm just going to have to fill in those little gaps with some red paint, and that shouldn't be too much of an issue. The names went down really nicely. That was just a big flat decal on a flat surface, so there was no problems there. And yeah, I mean, this is what's left of some of the decals. Even the little bits that came off started to splinter up. It just splintered into shards. And that's just a case of a decal being too brittle, too rigid. Whether that's due to age or just the way they've printed them, I'm not really sure. I mean, it looks like a relatively new kit, so I don't think they're too old. But anyway, thankfully there weren't too many decals to deal with. These ones along here went down okay. Some little pinstripes on the back. And there's just a couple underneath the engine section there. So yeah, so I'll finish up these decals with a bit of red paint and then move on to the final touches. Okay, so the next step is to tone the decals down a little bit. Now they do look quite nice and red, but they kind of pop out a bit too much compared to the rest of the paintwork. So I'm just going to tone those down just with a light dusting off the base coat of the white grey, and then go over and do a bit more staining with the pale blue grey over the top. Right, so all the spraying has been completed. Now I just need to seal everything in and give it a flat coat with Tamiya's TS80 Flat Clear from a spray can. And no, I haven't forgotten about the engine panel. So for this I'm just going to spray the two main bits transparent blue and a little bit at the top transparent red. And for the stand itself, I just want this to look like a big chunk of metal, nothing too fancy. So I'm going to do an undercoat of black, then a base coat of gunmetal, and then dry brush it with some aluminium. Alright, so there it is all wrapped up, and it always feels good to finish a model that's too big for the camera, so it barely fits in without putting it on an angle. But in case you're wondering, it sits at about 45 centimeters in length, and that's just under 18 inches, I think. So yeah, pretty nice sizable model, and yeah, I'm really happy with how it's come out. The sort of shading staining effect that I did is kind of washed out once the final flat coat went down, and it's bathed in light as it is now. It kind of diminishes the effect a bit, but I did pull it back a little bit because it started to look a bit too much like battle damage, and I didn't really want it to look too noticeable. So it is there, but you kind of have to look for it in certain lighting conditions. So yeah, not 100% happy with how that went, but yeah, overall, I'm really happy with the kit itself. There were a few gaps that I had to fill in, and as I mentioned before, there was a few parts that struggled to fit together, but everything went together eventually, and there's no major warping or defect issues. There's hardly any flash on the kit. It's always a bit of a change going from so many Bandai kits that are pretty much flawless and they all just snap together to a kit that actually requires glue. There's a bit of a change up to my regular model habits, but so yeah, as always, I'm keen to know what you guys think of the result, and or the kit itself, or the way I've done it. I kind of do wish there was more of a chance to do a lot more weathering and a lot more battle damage, but I actually kind of like the way it looks at the moment, especially once you get different lighting on all of the details. It certainly gives it a sense of scale and weight, having it to be one sort of big flat colour and just letting all of the details do the rest of the work, really. Now let's get a closer look in here. So it's quite interesting because there's parts of the kits that look like construction gaps where they actually aren't, so it's kind of nice to have parts of the kits that were construction seams, but they don't really stand out compared to all of the other seams on the ship. So it kind of reminds me of building a tank or some other type of armour that doesn't require a lot of perfect finishing. And the decals, they look alright in the end, despite all of the issues I had with them. At least the nameplate went down okay. I suppose the opportunity is there to have a bit of artistic license in how you paint it up, all the different colours you could use, and the weathering. If you really wanted to do a nice battle damaged version, you certainly got the chance. And so I'm just going to do a flyby of the ventral side. All of that amazing detail in there. Nice big hole for the stand, of course. Yeah, just a few decals down there. So yeah, it certainly makes a nice impressive display piece. Shot of the back. The light does kind of seep through the kit itself, giving a slight glowing effect to the engines there, which was unintended, but a nice little side effect. You'd certainly have to do a lot of light blocking if you were to light this kit. And yeah, I didn't decide to do like windows or any of that detail. Like I've noticed in a lot of screenshots and a lot of pictures, all the lighted windows seem to be yellow, so I could have gone in and put yellow dots everywhere, but I decided not to do that. Just leave it as is. And a shot of the bridge and the front end. All of that detail, which I'm sure has a purpose. Okay, so I'll wrap up the video there. I hope you've enjoyed watching the build. And as I mentioned before, please leave any comments, questions, criticisms down below, and I'll be happy to reply. And if you've liked what you've seen and you want to see more of this sort of stuff, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because there'll certainly be more Galactica to come. And as always, thanks for watching, and until next time, this is Galactica Actual, signing off.